Hello, I hope you liked that little introduction. It has nothing to do with this video, but my sons get excited about Indiana Jones and not so much the viola or fifths, and I needed to do that to get their help. And I like Indiana Jones too. Fifths have scared and traumatized me for decades, and that's partly because I didn't practice them enough, to be honest. And but to be fair, they don't appear in our technical manuals much. The flesh scale systems avoid them and other things like that. We do thirds and octaves and sixths and whatnot, but fifths we don't see in our training often. But then we play solo Bach or Hindemith or many other things, and there's fifths everywhere, and it's like a cold bucket of water on the head. We just can't escape the reality, and it's very unforgiving when fifths are out of tune, isn't it? Okay, I wish I could say that this approach to the fingerboard was my idea, but it absolutely was not. It's been done for probably centuries, and certainly by great players over time. It came to me via YouTube, which is a wonderful resource, from a man named Rodney Friend, who was the concertmaster of one of the big British orchestras back in his playing days. He's a teacher now, a marvelous teacher. And he was, 6 feet away from many of the great string players, Heifetz, Milstein, Oistrakh, and he watched them closely and marveled at their effortlessness, as do we, and noticed something about their playing that got him thinking. And it's about the idea of always playing fifths, even when you're not actually playing a sounding fifth. Now we play an instrument that's tuned in fifths. Now we have 4 strings, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But we only have 3 fifths. 1, 2, 3. Only 3 fifths. Now, fast forward a little bit. If you adapt to this technique, you'll find that when you play the viola, it's like playing on a 3-stringed instrument instead of 4 strings, which is kind of an amazing thing. So let's get right to it. Now, we're taught when we first learn, if we have to play on the C string, or our lowest string, we kind of crank the arm around, we make a bit of a tunnel, and we avoid the upper strings, so like this. It's hard to avoid touching the G string entirely with our fingers, but we do our best, so that if there's any resonance to come from above, we're not blocking the strings. Okay, now what that does is puts our elbow way under the viola, and it makes tunnels out of our fingers. And to be honest with you, and now that I've adapted my technique to this fifths idea, it feels terrible to me. However, if we think in fifths, so if we do I couldn't do that a month ago, but I've been practicing it, and doggone it, it's gotten a lot better. And it will for you too. If we think, even when we're playing on 1 string, that we're really draping the fingers over the string above that, it's so much more comfortable. So for C major scale, now although I'm not playing a sounding fifth, my fingers are blocking the fifths. But I'm only playing on the C string. Now what this has done is taken my elbow back here, which feels great. It's brought my wrist in a little bit, and it's taken my fingers and taken them off their tips and put them on the pads, which is great for viola players. It's great. Great for vibrato, for intonation, for everything. It feels marvelous, just marvelous. The arm is, of course, very happy here, and a little less happy here. Now, you don't need to clear the upper string. That was the thing that kind of blew my mind a little bit. You really don't. Now, if you want to check and see whether your G is in tune, the 4th finger, you can make your tunnel, but then just go right back to draping it over the next string. So, and then, because you've been blocking the 5th with your 1st finger, it's right there. And now we switch to blocking 5ths, or at least draping the finger over the next highest string, which is the D string. And the 1st finger's just sitting there waiting. And then we keep going. always blocking primarily with first and second fingers. Try it. You should try it. You should test out any idea. And if it doesn't work, then you shouldn't do it. But this is worth trying. It's very worth trying. Okay, let's just get right to some other ideas. When we're taught to play octaves, we think we put the first finger on the low string only, and the fourth finger on the higher string only. So we do this. Right? But I'll tell you something. If you put the first finger on both strings, it feels so much better and solid and comfortable. I've been practicing octaves like this now for about a few weeks, so it's just so much easier and feels fabulous, physically fabulous, really, really great. Okay, thirds. Oftentimes we're taught third finger, or the lower finger, the one that's on the lower string, balances here, and then the higher finger is on the upper string. So we do this. But if the first finger goes on both strings, it feels so much better. You go from this, where each finger's on one string only, to this, where the first finger's on both strings, and it just feels amazing. Not only for blocked thirds, but which are rare relatively, but when you're playing single notes and crossing from string to string, you do this. So if you're playing, say, this something from the D minor prelude, so blocking that fifth, block the fifth, is so much easier than doing. Try it. Just try it. Maybe you'll become a big believer like me. In the D minor prelude that I just played, I would often avoid the open A because the open A is shrill and strident. So I don't have to avoid the open A anymore because of this situation. So if I was doing, is difficult to do. It's actually a little bit uncomfortable and painful when we have to go low one and then a 4 on the lower string. Doesn't feel fabulous, even though I'm not squeezing. But if we do this, the first finger blocks the fifth, rather than only on the A. You hear that open A? It's an unattractive sound. Amazing. Amazing. You should try this. You should try this. And if it doesn't work for you, then don't do it, obviously. But I'll review. So rather than sitting on one string, typically, with fingers on their tips, you put the finger on the pad, which ends up draping the finger over 2 strings. And what will happen, I'll show you from this angle. The elbow will go back, and the wrist will come in a little bit. Now, obviously, when you're playing fifths, do not squeeze. Do not squeeze. It's very tempting when you play a fifth that when it's out of tune, you squeeze to make it better. And you end up squeezing the left hand and the bow, and a light goes off in your head and says, wow, I got it in tune, I got to squeeze. And it's just a terrible, terrible thing. Don't do that. So you bring the finger down right between both strings. Aim for the place between the strings. And don't squeeze. Bring it down lightly. And you tune fifths with the combination of your elbow and with that light finger, which is not pressing the strings down. So if you need to put a little bit more finger weight, balance on one of the strings, you're not tapped out. You're not already squeezing the finger to the fingerboard, and you can adjust the intonation like this. Bam, real quick. Okay, hopefully this is clear. And you should practice it. Remember especially about the octaves, the thirds, and for sixths, I do it too. So rather than this, each finger only on one string, I put the low finger on both strings. Feels amazing. And then there's some tangly chords that we face now and then that are made much easier by this. So tritones. So rather than doing this, again, the elbow's cranked under to make room for the second finger and the first finger. The first finger is playing a fifth, elbows back, so much more comfortable. And then certain chords, you can leverage this to great effect. So for this chord, say, right? For that chord, if the first finger's on both strings rather than only the G, and the second finger a little bit on the D string too. So you've actually got this going on. Feels so much more comfortable than that. I hope that this video helps you. I will link below the source where I got this from, because it was not my idea. And you can watch that for more information. It's a longer video, about 50 minutes, and I'd recommend watching it if you find that this is interesting or helpful. Happy practicing, and enjoy working on fifths. I'm very friendly with them now. We're good friends, and I'm very happy about that. It's made everything so much easier, and I can play for hours and I don't get tired, and I hope that is true for you too. Bye.